Welcome to Connect and Collaborate. I'm Alex Hopkins, your on-air producer, and I'm very excited that we have Rebecca Laurie in studio today. She is the Director of Communications for DORA, Colorado, and Rebecca visits us about once a month to talk about, you have 10 divisions, right?
Yes.
Within DORA.
10 divisions, many offices, over 40 boards and commissions.
Wow.
Yes.
I didn't realize it was 40 boards.
Yes. In fact, the last number I saw is that 1 in 7 Colorado workers have some sort of a professional license through DORA.
Really?
Yes.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome stuff.
Yeah. it's really cool. But today we're switching it up a little bit because we are going to talk about HOAs. Boy, everybody's favorite topic.
Nobody ever complains about their
Homeowners
HOA.
associations. And we have a very, very unique role in DORA that more people really should know about, and that is why we brought it on today. Today we have joining us Shanneyvie Johnson. Shanneyvie is our HOA Information and Resource Officer, which is housed in the Division of Real Estate at DORA. She's been in this role since 2017, and she has a fantastic background. In fact, I also would be remiss to not recognize that today is September 11th.
Yes.
And of course, you know, our hearts go out to all the families that were affected by that, and the country as a whole. Both Cindy Schoenhout and Shanneyvie are from New York City. And so I'm sure that, you know, today is just always kind of a particularly rough day. So I wanted to recognize that. Now, Shanneyvie, she came here in 2014, I think, after getting her JD from New York Law School. And she has worked as a self-represented litigant coordinator for the courthouses in both Pueblo and El Paso County. She is fluent in Spanish, and she is a fantastic resource to have to be able to discuss all the kind of ins and outs of a homeowners association and that process. So she goes out to different homeowners associations all the time to talk to them and just do overall education. So we're really happy to have you here, Shanneyvie.
And I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much. I'm super excited. It's my first time on the radio, so I'm doubly excited to be able to talk about my office and to do it in such a new way.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're going to do great. I am interested in knowing a little bit of background about the HOA office.
Sure. So the HOA Information and Resource Office was created by the Colorado Legislature in 2010 as a result of some of the concerns from homeowners regarding their HOAs. The office was given to provide homeowners with information on their rights and responsibilities under the Colorado Common Interest Ownership Act, which is the law that kind of governs HOAs. The office was further tasked with creating an annual report from the data gathered from complaints that I'm given from homeowners, as well as from the registrations of HOAs. We were also tasked with creating a lot of resources and providing education to homeowners. However, because we're not a regulatory program, we're kind of different in that sense from other DORA divisions. We don't regulate, so we don't provide any sort of legal advice to homeowners. We don't advocate on their behalves, and we can't find HOAs if they're doing something wrong. We're really just an information resource office.
Okay. Who would you, I guess, who would you recommend someone go to if they do, if you are looking to give a fine to your HOA, right? They've done something wrong.
You mean file a complaint?
File a complaint, yes.
So I do accept complaints, and again, that goes towards our data, and it's really, really important because I like to think of my office as one that we're kind of testing to see what the legislature kind of wants to do next with HOAs, whether they want to expand on our office to kind of give us those powers where we can go in and kind of be like, hey, you guys are doing this wrong, you're not following the state laws, or whether they're like, no, HOAs are fine just the way they are. So it's really important that we do get that data. However, I'll talk a little bit later about what homeowners can do when their HOAs have kind of gone off the rails.
Cool, thank you.
Which isn't necessarily an unusual thing, is what we understand.
Yeah, well, I will say this. No one ever calls me when their HOA is doing great.
Yeah.
I would love it if they did, but those are are the calls I get.
So you mentioned the Colorado Common Interest Ownership Act. What is that exactly?
So HOAs are governed by three main things. Their own governing documents, which usually are like their covenants, their rules and regs, and their bylaws. Then they're governed by the Colorado Common Interest Ownership Act, which is the statute that discusses the rights and responsibilities of homeowners. And with that, they're also governed by the Colorado Nonprofit Act. And that generally covers the duties and obligations of the board and its members, because all HOAs are also nonprofit corporations, and they need to be registered with the Secretary of State as such.
I don't think I ever realized that.
Thus an HOA board,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
An
Okay.
oversight board.
And so usually there's kind of a hierarchy on what you need to look at first. And I always tell people the first thing you're going to go to is your own governing documents. Make sure you read those. If something isn't clear in there, or if it's not in there, you may want to take a look at Kiowa and then the Nonprofit Act to kind of get all of your bases covered.
And Kiowa is
The
Colorado
no, not-
Interest Ownership Act.
That's right. That's
Okay.
the other name for it.
Okay.
So, what are some of those issues that you find most frequently
Within an HOA.
within an HOA or contacted to
About,
get
yeah.
some help with? Yeah.
So the number one thing I get is due increases and assessments. Because HOAs obviously collect dues, and they can also assess whenever there's any sort of, we live in Colorado, so hail damage on your roofs is the biggest one. And then when boards aren't enforcing the covenants equally or just not at all, that's also a very big one. Or when boards aren't being transparent, meaning residents feel like they're hiding something or they're not getting the paperwork that they should be getting. Those are the main ones, but not at all the entire list. In fact, our annual report has the entire list of complaints that we receive for that year, and it kind of breaks it down by district, so to speak.
Okay.
So if you want to take a look at that, it's on our website, and we publish one every year.
I would imagine that's a long list.
It's pretty long, yeah.
Yeah.
We get a lot of complaints. But I just want to make sure people know that there are some things that your HOA board just can't control.
Right.
A lot of neighbor-to-neighbor disputes are one of those things. If you have a neighbor whose dog is constantly, pooping in your yard and you want to complain to your HOA, they're going to be like, well, you need to handle that. Maybe go talk to your neighbor or something about that. That's
Yeah.
not really something we do.
Communication's ideal.
Right.
We would think. Or, if there's painting going on and there's smell coming down, and again, that's not something that your board will probably get involved with. But generally, HOAs don't have a cap on due increases, so if that's usually a complaint, that's the first thing I'm going to say is, well, they can charge as much as they need to charge based on your budget for that year. So if there is a due increase, or a due cap, then that would be in your governing documents, but most HOAs don't have that. As far as assessments, I would highly recommend that those homeowners speak to their insurance agent for HO6 insurance, and it's kind of like what I think in my mind as gap insurance. It'll cover, for the most part, those assessments. So you're not stuck paying a $10,000 assessment for your new roofs because, the HOA didn't have enough money. So that's what HO6 is good for. And then we would love to think that all HOAs are enforcing equally, even against themselves. So that's how it should be. Is that always a practice? No, but that's what we want. And then there are definitely certain documents that your HOA should be providing homeowners, and there's in fact a bill on it, HB 12-1237. And I do have a copy of a shortened version of that just lists out all the documents that they should be providing, those documents that they cannot give you, and those documents that the HOA board can decide whether or not to give you, depending on the situation. So if anybody wants a copy of that, they can of course contact me or get it off our website. Everything on our website is up to date and accurate.
I should mention that we just launched a really great consumer website for the HOA Information Office that has all those materials. It gives information about different webinars and things that the office in Shanneyvie is really spearheading, and that's on our askdora.colorado.gov website. And I really encourage people to go and check it out, and I'll mention it again a little bit later. You had mentioned some of those disputes that HOAs. I don't know if this is the term, in their bylaws or their rules, can't necessarily get involved with, but it doesn't seem to stop, of course, people wanting to know, is there something that my HOA should be doing? So some of the things Shanneyvie and I had talked about earlier were things like barking dogs, marijuana grows, smokers. There's a lot of nuances that when you go into an HOA community and you're paying money, you think, well, my HOA needs to advocate on my behalf personally. And that's not always technically the case. Can you highlight that a little bit?
Yeah, and that's absolutely correct. While you're a homeowner there, so is the other person that you're having an issue with. And so it's a very high balance of, your rights versus their rights. You guys should have equal rights. And so weed is legal in Colorado, and that's just something that homeowners need to be aware of and accept. It is legal. People are allowed to smoke in their homes. And whether you don't like it or not, they have that right. And unless the HOA itself has a no smoking policy, it's really very hard for an HOA to come in and be like, hey, are you the one smoking in here? We are getting rumors that you're smoking, when they don't have significant proof that that's what's happening, or if it's not an HOA that's banned smoking of all kinds.
Do you have a lot of those?
A lot of HOAs actually do ban smoking 100%, just because they don't want, it causes a lot of issues with the painting and the walls and things like that, so it is banned. And a lot of older communities absolutely have no smoking whatsoever. So there are those, but again, it's just one of those things that's really, really hard for anyone to control, especially in HOA when they're not vigilant 24/7. A lot of board members are just volunteers. They have everyday jobs. They go to work, they come home, and then they have to, also be on the board, and it's a very difficult job. It's just as hard as to be a homeowner and having issues as it is to be a board member and having to regulate over these issues.
Absolutely.
Sure, and then there's different personalities involved always.
Always.
And people's versions of what is, right and wrong in terms of property use. And so, you mentioned an interesting point where it's not necessarily, part of the HOA rules per se to limit, say, marijuana smoking. Right. But then, we have the issue of, say, an apartment complex that is governed by an HOA and the hallways smell like marijuana. And so people complain and that sort of thing. And that seems to be a common thing here. But the fact is that when you're going and looking for a new apartment, whether to rent or to buy, well, to rent, it's not an HOA, but to buy.
Yeah.
What advice can you give to people, or that you typically give to people? What type of homework should they do in advance before they go and actually make that purchase of that condo or townhome or any kind of connected type of community?
So my advice would be, and this is a little unorthodox, but it's absolutely something I do when I'm looking for a new place to live, go talk to the neighbors. Okay. Go knock on a door and say, hey, I'm considering purchasing in here. What problems are you guys having in this community? Mm-hmm. Are there any problems? Do you guys have any sort of infestations? Is there a lot of smoking? Has there been any crime activity? Because these are questions that you want answered to, and not necessarily the HOA board is going to tell you these things because they want you to purchase in their community. They want to increase your community value.
And they may not even be tracking these things.
Yeah, and a lot of HOAs aren't going to be aware of some of these things that are happening. So it's always good to kind of just talk to some of the neighbors, go out there in the community and see what you're getting yourself involved in. That's always the number one thing. The other thing, when it comes to the marijuana thing, I would highly recommend, if boards are having issues with it or homeowners are having issue with it, maybe speak to an attorney about what you can do in the legal aspect of it, and kind of get some information from them.
Yeah. Interesting concept of bringing up communication with your neighbors, right?
Right.
Isn't that something that you would want to establish anyway?
Well, September 28th is Good Neighbor Day, so that might be the time.
Yes. Thank you. Good
knock,
to know.
Knock cookies. It's Good Neighbor Day. Could you please stop moving your furniture so often upstairs? The scraping on the floor is about to drive me crazy.
feels like you're speaking from experience.
We've all been there.
So now what happens if the issue is directly with the board?
So there are a few different things you can do when you're having issues. If it's a neighbor-to-neighbor dispute, again, you may want to just go over and speak to your neighbor and try to get that addressed. If that one-on-one communication isn't working, and that could also go for your board. If you're having issues with your board, maybe just, go speak to them at the next meeting or after the meeting's done. Send them an email. But if that one-on-one communication isn't working, I'm a very high advocate of mediation. Get somebody else in the room that'll kind of calm the issue down and allow you both to kind of get your side of the story, and maybe together with the mediator you can come to some sort of agreement that you might have not thought of otherwise. And if the issue deals directly with, something that the board is really, really doing that's completely wrong, such as fraud or embezzlement, and some of these HOAs have millions of dollars, so they're embezzling those, it can get kind of very extremely serious. I would highly recommend going through your board removal process. All HOAs should have one. It's usually located in their governing documents. If there's not one in there, the Nonprofit Act has a section regarding board removal, and then the replacement process as well. So you'll go ahead and remove the board and put one in place that the homeowners feel would do a better job of running their HOA.
Is there a certain sign to look out for if somebody is embezzling or having fraud?
Well, it kind of goes back to that transparency issue that a lot of HOAs have when they're not receiving documents. Like I said, there are certain documents that you're allowed to request to give you an idea of what your HOA is doing. Some of those are financial documents, so you get those, and then you can make sure that the HOA is using your funds, your money, the homeowner's money, in the way that they say that they're doing it. If you're having issues with getting those documents, that's a little bit of a red flag right there. You're like, well, why can't I see these?
Yeah.
You can also see contracts from 3 years ago to make sure that the amount that they said was getting paid is what they paid for it. So again, if they're kind of stonewalling you on receiving some of these documents, it's definitely a red flag, and you may want to do a little bit more research or a little bit more legwork and seriously trying to get some of those documents.
I would imagine that actual embezzlement tends to be unusual. Mm-hmm. However, there have been some cases, I don't know if you know any off the top of your head, recently, that you can kind of describe the scenario and then how that person was found.
So this embezzlement issue wasn't necessarily an HOA. Homeowners probably don't want to embezzle their own money that much, but it was a community association management company. So it was a management for the HOA. And this particular company was managing several different HOAs, which is how it kind of works. You manage several different HOAs, and they embezzled money from each of the HOAs that they were managing. Nobody noticed until, none of the HOAs noticed. Who noticed were the company's employees. 2 employees came forward and said, hey, we think the company owner is stealing money from our HOAs.
Wow.
So the HOAs never noticed. And one of the reasons why HOAs never noticed is because they didn't take a look at their own books. A lot of HOAs think that the management company is going to take care of everything, and they don't ever pay attention again. Well, that's kind of a pitfall. Sometimes things like this does happen. Mm-hmm. And you may want to make sure that you're keeping an eye out on what's happening with your money. Do those audits every 7 years, Make sure that the finances are matching up with what's going away or where the money is going. So I would highly recommend that even if you have a management company, you're still a boss. Be a boss and kind of keep an eye on what the management company is doing. And that's absolutely okay. I know it's difficult when you work 40 hours a week and then you have to come home and kind of review those documents and make sure that the management company is doing its job. But in the end, it may save your HOA a lot of money.
Yeah. How was that resolved, or has that been resolved yet?
So what happens when that kind of process is that we have investigators at DORA who will go through and request documents from the management company, as well as their insurance documents and E&O. And so once they receive that, they kind of start going through all the documents that they've requested to see what exactly happened. In this case, the management owner disappeared.
Weird.
And so she left with all that money, and because Colorado, reach isn't that far, she can absolutely go to a new state and start a management company there.
Oh, no.
And no one will ever know that she, broke any laws here.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a good point that you make, Shanneyvie, which is that many HOAs will hire a community association management company to take care of their business, and then because they are volunteers, it's a bit of a set it and forget it mentality. We've hired them, they're taking care of our
Right.
needs. But coming up with a structure to have some of those checks and balances inherently by the board would be really an important step to make sure that, again, I don't think, obviously that this is happening very often per se, but it has happened. There's certainly case examples of it happening. So.
Absolutely. And I'm not saying that management companies aren't bad. Most of them,
Right.
all of them are usually very,
Yeah.
very, very good.
Yes.
But with everything, there's always those rotten apples that you kind of don't expect until they hit, and you're just like, oh gosh, what am I
Yeah.
going to do now?
Right.
But for the most part, our community association managers are amazing, and they do great work. And you can, we have a list of really good ones that have never had any sort of action taken against them, and you can get that off our website as well.
Right. You can see every
You can see all the
complaint that's been
You can request complaints against our community
Okay.
association managers, so you can kind of see what complaints have been done. But we have a list of all the licensed community association managers in good standing at DORA, and the list is extremely long, so they're out there and they're great.
So you had mentioned that, really the ideal process for handling conflict is through mediation, but ultimately that might not work. So what would be the next step?
So if you've kind of exhausted, trying to communicate and mediation, and it's not really the board that's having the issue, the next big step would be taking the issue to court, filing a civil suit. And I try to stay away from that because you're in a community. These are your neighbors. Even the board members are your neighbors. And so I like to tell people to keep that in mind as they're going to file a lawsuit, because filing a lawsuit can potentially ruin someone's life. It takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of time. So that's absolutely something that can be done, but just be cautious about it.
So what do you recommend ultimately for HOAs to run smoothly and effectively and really bring that benefit that we know that HOAs can bring?
I would recommend the first thing you're going to want to do is read those governing documents. I know when you first move into a place, they hand you 600 pages, and they're like, these are your governing documents. And it's a daunting task, absolutely, but it's extremely important to know what your rights are as a homeowner and what the board is supposed to be doing for you in your HOA. And it's all in there. It's the rules, the regs, all of it is in those documents you're handed when you first move. So it's extremely important that you do read them, and don't wait till something comes up before you read them. And then the next thing I would do is just get the education. There are a lot of organizations out there, including DORA, that provides education on a monthly terms. In fact, I even go out into the community and do several in different cities in Colorado, just so that people can have that education. And then the last but not least is to have a copy of Kyle on you, especially during those meetings where you want to make sure that the board is doing what they're supposed to be doing, or that the HOA, or that for the board to know that they're doing things correctly. So those three things are what I would highly recommend to have an effective HOA.
Awesome.
So the goal for the office really has been to expand its outreach, and as I had mentioned, the new website on askdora.colorado.gov does have a lot of this information. And Shanneyvie, you even hold monthly forums, I believe.
That's correct.
At the DORA offices that people can go and show up and ask all their questions.
Yeah, and it's also online, so you don't have to leave your house or your job. You can just watch it via our webcast. We also do a monthly digest where we just pick a topic and we'll talk about it in that digest, and you can sign up for the email blast and you'll receive that digest every month.
Awesome. And we have put all of that information as well at cobrt.com/radio-podcast. Look up Rebecca Laurie, look up DORA Colorado. You can find all of our past shows as well as this one. And you can find all of the stuff on the website. We've provided that link as well. Be sure to like and subscribe our YouTube page while you're here. Shanneyvie, it's been a pleasure. Rebecca, always great to have you in studio.
Thank you,
Thank
Alex.
you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shanneyvie.
Bye-bye.